What tools do you use to try your best to implement the positives of these archetypes? Like, what in your life, how have you tried to implement them? And like, what practices do you have? What habits do you have? Like, is it through the Bible? Is it through talking about it? Is it, yeah, what use tools do you use?
So I think one of the first things is we have to have we have to have heroes and we have to have
Mm,
mentors. And sometimes a mentor or a hero is somebody we know personally, and sometimes it's somebody who we learn from who's an author or a teacher or a professor. But one of the aspects of coming of age, excuse me, is that it almost has to be given. And so, if you look at femininity, for example, the feminine has all of these built in and really biological things that traditionally older women will come alongside younger women and usher them into healthy femininity, right? Because there are things that they have to know. They have to know about their period. They have to know about the changes that happen in their body. They have to know about ovulation and pregnancy, and then as a woman grows into maturity and she does start to birth children. I think traditionally the older women of the tribe would come alongside her, talk to her about the birthing process and talk to her about what it was like to be a mother and all these things. So biologically they had these kind of rituals built in, and I think that insulated them for a long time from what we've been seeing in men for much longer, and that is that we have no initiatory process, that we have no rituals by which we come from boyhood into manhood. And if you look at ancient civilizations, what you see is that they had all these rituals where the village elders would take the young man at 13 or 14 out into the wilderness and they'd give him a bow and arrow and they'd say good luck, and then they would sit and wait for him to see if he could survive in the wilderness and kill his first deer. And that's that kind of initiatory process um, doesn't exist within our world for the most part. Maybe the closest thing we could say is if you're in college and you get brought under the wing of some really good professor, or you have a mentor that brings you up in your maybe you're a an electrician who's working toward your journeyman electrician license, right? Um, but for the most part, we don't have any of those things. So as men, we have to identify mentors. We have to identify leaders. And for me personally, that a huge part of that's happened spiritually, right? That
mm,
I have a number of spiritual heroes, from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was an amazing theologian who started underground seminaries in Nazi Germany, who was also a double agent for the Abwehr. So he's this amazing like Christian thinker who also carries out and executes two assassination attempts on Hitler because he realizes the grave evil that Hitler's perp, perp, I lost the word, but he's
hmm
putting out in the world, right? And so for me, whether those heroes are heroes of my spiritual faith or heroes like that, those are the kind of men that I see these archetypes embodied in, and I think that's a huge first step toward that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like, yeah, I don't know how many men my age have mentors, or men in general who have mentors or who don't, but I'm like, I feel like today it's almost maybe easier to find mentors. Like, I guess I found a lot of mentors through the books I've read or the podcasts I listen to, or even the Bible as well. Like, I don't know, even if I don't technically know them or they don't know me, I still can reach that level of like, wow, I respect and want to be like, or I look up to, or, but yeah, I guess one of my favorites. I think I've mentioned this to you before, but like Abel versus Cain. Like, which of the two routes are you wanting to take? Are you wanting to take the route of making sacrifices in your life and choosing the bigger or the better path, being a bigger person, being a person in the community that people can trust, or the other side, which is like putting up false sacrifices, kind of just putting it half-ass of like, and then also complaining to God about the world, blaming God about your scenario. Or it's like, that's just like an example of like a mentor, even if it's like a story from who knows how long ago. It's just, that's a great point. Like looking up to different role models, whether that be physically or in story or through listening or who knows, but
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that we're seeing all over in society right now is that we have deconstructed everything to the point that there are no heroes left, right? And so, you know, regardless of where you're at with religion, for example, right? You can look at a biblical figure like say David, and you can recognize the healthy king energy, but then you can, in his reign over the people of Israel, but then you can also recognize the addict and in his energy of taking Bathsheba and impregnating her while her husband's out on a battle campaign on in David's honor. And then you see the masochist kind of take over in his story as then he plots to have her husband killed, right? And so what we've done in society, though, whether it be a biblical archetype like that, or it be founding fathers or whoever it is we find one way in which they fail to meet our Olympian standards, and then we pull down the statue and we say, we completely deconstructed that hero or that role model because of faults in their life, and therefore we have no role models. And what person can ever live up to the standards that we've set in the 21st century of being perfect, right? None of them. And so as a result, we're losing the story, we're losing the mentors, we're losing the heroes, and we're completely adrift. And more often than not, we end up in one of these negative shadow poles of the healthy archetypes because we don't have anything to look to for an example.
yeah. And I guess it's just like something that you also learn from the biblical stories, Jesus specifically, is like this idea of like humility. I I don't know. I guess I take a lot of lessons from Jesus. One of them is humility, but it's like I feel like in our culture, people live as if, oh, we're the smartest, we're the most moral, we're the best humans that have existed. It's so easy to criticize the people in the past for being evil, terrible, stupid, racist, whatever. And it's like, man, you're not looking very deep into your own heart and your own desires, because you could be just as horrible or worse, especially without that humility. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm just a huge advocate of like, take out the plank in your own eye before you pull down the statues of people that truly tried their best but were still human. You know, it's just. But
Yeah.
I guess a lot of
And you
these
mentioned
lessons
this
come from the Bible.
earlier.
But yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned this earlier, the Jungian idea of incorporating the shadow, right? And then, and of course, biblically, the Apostle Paul talks about that too in Romans 7. He talks about how, why do I do the things I don't want to do? And the things I don't want to do, that's exactly the thing I do. That essentially what he's talking about is this, it's a Jungian principle of taking the shadow part, taking the evil part, and figuring out like, how do I incorporate that into who I am? And I think, from a biblical perspective, right, like the idea is that we have to approach that from a place of humility, recognizing our own limitations and failures, and then welcome in divine love and grace and mercy, and live as a person who is defined by love and grace and mercy, and hold that intention with the fact that, at the end of the day, I'm going to fail all over the place, but I'm going to fail forward, and I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going to live with grace for myself and for other people in the meantime.
Totally. Yeah. And I think That's why that could just be a case of like why maybe you should look into some of these stories, whether that be the Bible or a lot of these older stories. Like it, before you throw it away, there's going to be lessons in there that are just going to probably help you because they've helped people for thousands of years.